It was a quiet evening, the kind where you could almost hear the walls breathe. I sat at the end of the dinner table, my plate untouched, listening to the faint clatter of forks against porcelain. My son Michael sat across from me, his wife beside him, laughing at something on her phone. I tried to join in, tried to smile, but lately it seemed my very presence was an inconvenience. I reached for the breadbasket, my hands slower than they once were. And that's when it happened. "Mom, just stop," Michael snapped, his voice sharp and impatient. His fork clanged against the plate as he threw it down. "You're useless. You can't even pass food without making it awkward." The word hung in the air. Useless. For a moment, everything inside me froze. My hand trembled midair, and I set the basket down slowly, as if moving too quickly might shatter the last thread holding me together. I looked at him, my only son, the boy I had raised with everything I had in me, and his eyes avoided mine. Across from him, his wife smirked, her lips curling ever so slightly, as though she had been waiting for this moment. No one spoke. The silence was louder than any thunderstorm. Inside, my heart felt like it had been split open. My mind ran through years of sacrifice, nights I had gone hungry so he could eat, mornings I had dragged my tired body to work so his life would be easier. And now, the boy I had once carried in my arms looked at me as though I were nothing. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But instead, I sat there in silence, swallowing the pain, tasting the salt of unshed tears on my tongue. Michael pushed back his chair with a scrape. "Honestly, Mom, you just make things harder. Maybe you should, I don't know, stop trying so much. We can handle things." His words cut deeper with every syllable. I nodded faintly, as if agreeing would lessen the sting, but my chest ached with betrayal. The boy I had once kissed goodnight had become a man I barely recognized. Dinner ended with clinking plates and whispered laughter between him and his wife. I sat in my chair long after they left the table, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. The word useless replayed in my mind like a cruel echo. But as I sat there, something inside me shifted. My hands, still resting in my lap, slowly curled into fists. His words had hurt, yes, but they also awakened something. A quiet determination, a spark I thought I had lost years ago. I whispered to myself in the silence. If useless is what he sees, then he has forgotten who I really am. That night, as I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, I replayed the scene over and over. My chest tightened with every replay, but beneath the sorrow, another feeling grew stronger. Anger. Not wild anger, but steady, burning anger. The kind that steels your spine and sharpens your resolve. Michael didn't know it yet, but calling me useless was the beginning of something he would regret, because words once spoken cannot be taken back. And sometimes, one cruel word is all it takes to change everything. The next morning, as I brewed my coffee, the house felt different. Colder, emptier, yet somewhere deep within me, a plan was beginning to form. He thought I was powerless. He thought I had nothing left. But he was wrong. What he didn't know was that his father had left more behind than just memories. And soon, Michael would learn that the woman he had dismissed as useless still held the power to change his world forever. That night, after Michael's words sliced through me, I couldn't sleep. The house was still, but my mind refused to rest. I turned onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter, and closed my eyes. And suddenly, I was no longer in that room. I was back in time. I saw myself standing at the bus stop on a freezing winter morning, cradling little Michael against my chest. He was no more than 4, his tiny hands buried in my coat as I tried to shield him from the biting wind. I remember how my fingers were numb, how my shoes were thin and cracked, but I didn't care. As long as he was warm, as long as he was safe, nothing else mattered. Then another memory came. The long nights at the diner, balancing 2 trays in my hands while sweat trickled down my back. I'd smile at customers, but inside, all I could think about was getting home in time to tuck him into bed. Many nights I didn't eat. The tips I earned went straight to groceries, school supplies, rent. I would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of water, pretending I wasn't hungry, just so Michael wouldn't notice that I had skipped dinner again. I remembered the day he needed a new pair of shoes for school. His old ones were worn thin, the soles flapping with every step. I sold the gold bangles my mother had given me when I was married, the last piece of her I had left. I walked into that pawn shop with trembling hands, my heart breaking. But when I saw Michael run across the schoolyard in his new sneakers, laughing, I told myself it was worth it. Every sacrifice was worth it, and then there was the biggest sacrifice of all. When he was accepted into college, the tuition bill was more than I could ever afford. I remember the look in his eyes, excitement, hope, fear. I took on double shifts, cleaning houses during the day, serving tables at night. I even worked as a seamstress for neighbors, my fingers pricked and raw from stitching until dawn. But I never told him how tired I was. I never let him see me break. I just kept going, because his future mattered more than my pain. As these memories flooded me, I felt the sting of tears. All those years, all that sacrifice. And yet, one word erased it all. Useless. That was what I was to him now. I sat up in bed, staring at the faint glow of the streetlight outside my window. My heart ached with the unfairness of it all. The son I had given everything to, the boy I had raised on my own after his father passed, could not see me for who I truly was. To him, I was just an old woman who had outlived her purpose. But deep down, another thought began to take root. If he had forgotten the sacrifices, if he had blinded himself to my worth, then perhaps it was time he was reminded, not with words, but with actions, because a mother's sacrifices may be forgotten by an ungrateful child. But life has a way of making the truth resurface, and soon, Michael would see that the woman he called useless was the very reason he had everything at all. The next morning, as I walked through the house, I let my fingers trail along the walls. The paint was chipped in places, the wood floors creaked, but to me this was more than a building. It was my life stitched together in bricks and beams. Every corner of this home held a memory. In the living room, I could almost hear my late husband's laughter again, deep and warm, filling the space with comfort. In the kitchen, I saw the ghost of little Michael running in circles, his tiny feet pattering against the tiles as I tried to keep him still long enough to eat his breakfast. Even the garden outside still whispered the sound of his father's voice teaching him how to ride a bike. This house wasn't perfect, but it was ours. It was built with sweat, tears, and dreams. My husband and I had scraped together every penny to buy it, believing that one day it would be the place where our son felt safe, the foundation where he could build his own family. It was meant to be a legacy, something passed down with love and respect. But now, I could see the way Michael and his wife looked at it. Not as a home, not as a memory, not as a promise fulfilled. They looked at it like a prize. I remembered overhearing them one evening, whispering in the kitchen when they thought I had already gone to bed. "She can't live forever," his wife muttered, her voice low but sharp. Michael chuckled as if it were a joke. "Once she's gone, we'll sell this place. Imagine what we could get for it in today's market. Enough for a condo in the city. No more of this old suburban dump." My heart had clenched in that moment, but I had stayed quiet, retreating to my room without a word. I knew better than to confront them right then. Their laughter was cruel, but it revealed the truth. They didn't see this house as love. They saw it as money waiting to be claimed. I stood now in the doorway of Michael's old bedroom. The walls were still faintly painted with the light blue color he'd begged for when he was a boy. His trophies still lined the shelves, reminders of school days, soccer games, spelling bees I had cheered him through. I had never thrown any of it away, never changed this room because, to me, it was proof of who he was before greed began to change him. But standing there, I realized something painful. To him, these walls meant nothing anymore. He would tear them down for cash in a heartbeat. I closed the door softly, pressing my back against it. For the first time, the house that had once comforted me felt heavy, like a burden I carried alone. Still, I couldn't let go, not yet. This house wasn't just mine. It was my husband's legacy, my sacrifice, my proof that I had given everything for my family, and I wasn't about to watch it be treated like a pile of dollar bills waiting to be cashed in. I whispered to the quiet walls, "They may see money, but I see memories, and I won't let them erase that." What I didn't know then was that the very house they schemed to take from me would soon become the stage for their downfall. It started with whispers behind closed doors, little fragments of conversations I wasn't meant to hear. "When we sell the place, once she's out of the picture, we'll finally be free." At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I was mishearing. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. My son and his wife weren't waiting for me to live a long, peaceful life in the home I built. They were waiting for me to be gone. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the living room, I heard them in the kitchen. Voices low but sharp enough to cut. "Michael, we can't keep living like this," his wife complained. "This old house is falling apart. Think of the money we could get if we sold it. We deserve better." He sighed, but his voice carried no hesitation. "I know. As soon as Mom's out of the way, it's ours. Dad left it to me anyway, I'm sure of it. She's just holding on to it because she can't accept she's finished. Finished." I stood frozen, my hands clutching one of his shirts, the fabric trembling in my grasp. My chest tightened, but I kept silent. They thought I couldn't hear them, that I was too old, too tired, too useless to understand what they were plotting. But the worst came days later. We were sitting at the dinner table again. The same table where he had called me useless. His wife leaned in, her tone sweet as honey but laced with poison. "Michael, imagine it," she said, smiling as though she were already decorating her new home. "A penthouse in the city. No more creaky stairs, no more old wallpaper. And no more interruptions." Her eyes flicked toward me. I set my fork down, my appetite gone. "Interruptions?" I asked softly, though I already knew the answer. She didn't even flinch. "You know what I mean. It's not easy living with extra baggage." Michael didn't defend me. He didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he sighed and leaned back in his chair, his voice cold and dismissive. "Mom, you're just an old woman now. You've done your part, but let's be honest, you're not contributing anything. You should be grateful we even let you stay here. Most people your age would be in a nursing home." The words hit harder than any blow. My chest ached, my face burned, and yet I forced myself to sit still. I wanted to scream, to remind him of every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every piece of myself I had given for him. But I didn't. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized the boy I had raised was gone. What sat before me was a man blinded by greed, poisoned by entitlement, with no trace of the son who once ran into my arms after school. For a moment, I felt my body sway under the weight of his cruelty. But then, deep inside, something shifted again. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about survival. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. "Enjoy your meal," I said quietly, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Excuse me." I walked down the hall to my bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. My chest heaved as silent tears finally spilled down my face. But this time, my tears didn't weaken me. They sharpened me. I reached for the small drawer in my nightstand and pulled out a worn leather notebook. Inside, it was a card, faded with age but still crisp enough to read, the number of my late husband's lawyer. I stared at it for a long moment, my fingers trembling over the ink. My husband had trusted this man. He had promised that no matter what, he would protect me if the time ever came. And now, that time had come. I whispered to the quiet room, my voice steady despite the tears. If they want to see me as useless, then they're about to learn how wrong they are. With that, I picked up the phone and dialed. The phone rang only once before I heard a familiar voice on the other end. "Mrs. Carter," the lawyer said warmly. "It's been a long time. I wondered when I might hear from you." His voice carried the weight of years, steady and kind. I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath before answering. "Yes, it's time," I whispered. He didn't need me to explain. My husband had been a cautious man, always thinking 3 steps ahead. He had warned me long ago that love could be clouded by greed, that family bonds could break when money was at stake. Back then, I refused to believe it. I told him our son would never forget where he came from, never forget the sacrifices we made. But my husband had insisted on preparing a will, one that left no room for manipulation. Now, all these years later, I realized how right he had been. We arranged to meet the very next day at his office. When I arrived, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and leather. His shelves were lined with thick books, but my eyes went straight to the large sealed envelope on his desk. He tapped it gently. "Your husband thought of everything," he said. It protects you." He knew there might come a day when your son would forget the value of respect. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with both gratitude and sorrow. "And Michael?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. The lawyer opened the envelope carefully, his eyes scanning the document. "Your son will receive something small, a token, a reminder of his father's words. But the house, the assets, the keys, they all remain with you, as long as you live. Your husband wanted to ensure that no one could ever push you aside." Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't just tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of relief. My husband had seen what I refused to. He had known that one day I might stand alone, needing his protection even after he was gone. I left the office with the will in safe hands, my heart steadier than it had been in weeks. The power was no longer in Michael's grasp, no matter how smugly he spoke at the dinner table. The truth was locked away, waiting for the moment it would be revealed. That evening, I returned home to find Michael and his wife sitting in the living room, their voices low and excited. "When she's gone, we'll sell this place," his wife was saying. "I already looked at some condos. Marble countertops, a view of the city. Can you imagine? We'll finally live the life we deserve," Michael chuckled. "Yeah, it's just a matter of time." They didn't notice me standing in the hallway watching. My hands clenched at my sides, but instead of storming in, I turned quietly toward my room. Let them dream. Let them laugh. They had no idea the storm that was waiting. Over the next few days, I moved through the house differently. I still cooked dinner, still smiled faintly when Michael walked past, still folded his laundry. But inside, I was no longer broken. I was planning. Every cruel word, every careless smirk, every whispered scheme, I tucked them away in my memory. I wore silence like armor, because soon, when the lawyer read my husband's will aloud, their arrogance would shatter, and when that moment came, I would not need to raise my voice. All I would have to do was watch. The lawyer's office felt colder that day, though the sun shone brightly through the blinds. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, but inside my chest, my heart beat like a drum. I had sat in this office many times before with my husband, discussing savings, deeds, and plans for the future. But this was different. Michael strode in late, his wife clinging to his arm as though she were walking into a showroom to claim a prize. She was dressed to impress, with glittering earrings and a too-bright smile. Michael, on the other hand, carried an expression of bored entitlement, as if this whole thing were just a formality. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, slouching into the chair across from me. "I've got a dinner reservation later." The lawyer raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Instead, he adjusted his glasses and began. "This is the last will and testament of the late Mr. Richard Carter," he said firmly. "It was written and sealed 5 years before his passing, in full legal capacity." I kept my eyes low, but I could feel Michael's smirk growing by the second. His wife squeezed his hand. To them, this was already decided. The lawyer cleared his throat. "To my son, Michael Carter..." Michael straightened, ready to receive his crown. His wife tilted her chin proudly. "I leave a single gift. My old wristwatch. The one I wore every day of his childhood." The room went utterly silent. Michael blinked. "What?" the lawyer continued, unflinching. "It is my hope that when he looks upon it, he remembers the hours his mother and I worked, sacrificed, and built the life he now enjoys. Michael's face flushed crimson. That's it? A watch? Where's the rest? The house? The accounts? His wife leaned forward, her voice sharp. Excuse me, is this some kind of mistake? The lawyer ignored their outburst, his voice steady as he read on. To my beloved wife, Margaret Carter, I leave the entirety of my estate. The home we built together, all assets, savings, and possessions, remain hers until her final day. She is the foundation of this family, the heart of everything I worked for. No one will ever take that from her. I felt my breath hitch, tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. Michael, however, slammed his fist against the table. This is ridiculous. He knew I was supposed to inherit everything. You can't just— This is a legally binding document, Mr. Carter, the lawyer interrupted coolly. Your father's wishes are crystal clear. His wife scoffed, shaking her head. So what? We're supposed to sit around waiting for her to— What, die? This is insane. I finally lifted my gaze, meeting her eyes. My voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried a weight I hadn't spoken in years. You've already been waiting, haven't you? Dreaming of marble countertops and condos in the city. Counting down my days. Michael's mouth opened, but no words came out. His wife paled, her bravado cracking. I leaned back, folding my hands again. My husband knew. He saw through the greed, the disrespect. That's why he gave me the keys, not you. The lawyer, almost ceremoniously, slid a small velvet box across the table. Inside rested the house keys gleaming under the office light. Michael's eyes locked on them, his jaw tightening. He had expected a kingdom, and instead he had been handed nothing but the memory of his father's watch, a reminder of every sacrifice he had long forgotten. His wife hissed in his ear, demanding they contest it, that they fight, that they find some loophole. But for the first time, Michael's confidence faltered. His father's words echoed too loudly, the will too ironclad. I stood slowly, taking the keys in hand. My husband's protection, my dignity, my justice. And as I walked toward the door, I didn't look back. For the first time in years, Michael had nothing to say. The silence that followed the lawyer's final words was deafening. My son's face turned a shade I had never seen before, somewhere between red and pale, his lips trembling with disbelief. His wife's hand slid off his arm, her polished nails clutching at her handbag instead, as though the ground beneath her had shifted. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the lawyer's desk fan, a cruelly ordinary backdrop to the storm that had just erupted inside my boy. And then it came. His chair screeched against the polished floor as he leapt up, slamming his fist on the table. This is a joke. This has to be some sick joke. His voice cracked with rage, so loud it echoed off the paneled walls. She's manipulated this. She's twisted Dad's words. Tell me, Mom, how much did you pay him? I didn't move. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, my breathing steady. For years I had bowed my head, swallowed my pain, and tried to keep peace. But not today. Not after everything. I lifted my eyes to his, meeting the fury in his gaze with a calm he could not comprehend. Your father knew the truth of our lives, I said softly. He saw me. He saw the years. He saw everything I gave up for you. He wrote his will with his own hands, and no amount of shouting will erase that. The lawyer cleared his throat, his tone crisp and unshaken. Your father's will was drafted years ago, reviewed multiple times, and kept sealed until today. There is no manipulation. This is exactly what he wanted. But my son wasn't listening. His anger only grew, his hands trembling as though the betrayal were his to bear. He pointed at me, his finger shaking. You don't deserve this! You're nothing but a bitter old woman who clung to her pity stories. You think holding a set of keys makes you powerful? You've ruined everything! His words tore through the room, vicious and sharp. Once those words might have broken me. Once I might have gone home and wept into my pillow, asking where I went wrong. But now something was different. His rage didn't pierce me. It exposed him. It revealed the hollow arrogance that had blinded him, the greed that had twisted him into someone unrecognizable. I felt a strange peace, even as he raged before me. "You call me useless," I replied quietly. "But look at yourself now. Stripped of money, stripped of entitlement, all that's left is your anger. If respect was too heavy a burden for you to carry, then you were never worthy of what your father built." For a moment, the room froze. My words seemed to hang in the air, wrapping around him like a mirror he could not look away from. His wife shifted uncomfortably beside him, her cheeks flushed with shame. The lawyer leaned back, almost relieved that someone had finally said what needed to be said. My son growled, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "You'll regret this. You'll regret making me look like a fool." But I shook my head, standing slowly, the keys cold and solid in my hand. "The only regret I carry," I said, my voice firm but sorrowful, "is that I loved you so much I lost myself along the way. But no more. I won't regret reclaiming what your father and I built together, and I won't regret standing tall even if it means standing alone." His fists clenched, but he couldn't answer. He sank back into his chair, defeated by a truth too sharp to swallow. The power had shifted and he knew it. For once I wasn't the one shrinking under his words. He was. The lawyer gathered his papers, his tone final. "The will is binding. There will be no contesting it. Mrs. Andrews, the estate is yours." And as I stepped toward the door, my son's eyes burned holes into my back. Yet I walked straighter than I had in years, each step carrying me closer to a freedom I thought I'd lost. What he didn't yet know was that this was not just about property, or money, or keys. It was about something far greater: dignity, justice, and the lesson he would be forced to live with for the rest of his days. And though I didn't turn back, I could feel it, the crack in his pride, the collapse of his arrogance. That was only the beginning. The afternoon sun was sharp when I stepped out of that office, the keys cool and solid in my palm. For years I had carried only invisible burdens: worry, sacrifice, and the weight of being dismissed. Now, for the first time in a long time, I carried something different, something real, something that could not be stolen from me with words. Behind me, I could still hear my son's muffled voice rising in the office, his anger ricocheting against walls that no longer belonged to him. His wife's sharper tones overlapped with his, but their arguments sounded hollow, like two people scrambling to hold on to a dream that was never theirs. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. I walked to the street as though I were walking into a new life. Every step felt lighter, steadier, as though the ghosts of sleepless nights and silent tears were finally letting go of me. I thought about the woman I had been, the young wife, holding my husband's hand as we stood in front of that little house we were so proud of. The single mother patching holes in the roof, making meals stretch when money ran thin, working until my body ached just so my boy could have a chance at the future I never had. And I thought about the woman at the dinner table, silenced by the cruel word useless. That word had cut me, but it had also woken me. It had pushed me to stand taller, even if my knees trembled. Now I wasn't useless. I was unbreakable. As I reached the car, I let the keys dangle from my hand, catching the light. They were more than metal. They were a reminder that love, respect, and legacy cannot be measured in money or dismissed with insults. They were proof that my husband had seen me, even when my own son had chosen not to. A quiet strength rose in my chest. My son thought he had won when he called me worthless. He thought my silence meant surrender. But silence, I realized, can be its own kind of power. Silence can wait. Silence can watch. And when the time is right, silence can strike louder than any scream. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, shutting out the noise of their fury. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge, but because justice had spoken. And justice, when it finally arrives, is more powerful than anger, more final than greed. I didn't know if my son would ever learn the lesson. Maybe he would stay angry, blaming everyone but himself. Or maybe one day, when he had nothing left but the echo of his own cruelty, He would remember the look in my eyes when I refused to bow, and maybe then he would understand that respect is the only inheritance worth fighting for. As I turned the keys in the ignition, I whispered into the still air, "Thank you." Not to him. Not to anyone in that room. But to my husband, who had seen the road ahead and made sure I would not walk it empty-handed. And as the car rolled forward, I left behind not just the lawyer's office, not just my son's anger, but the years of being unseen. Ahead of me stretched the quiet freedom of knowing who I was and what I had survived. The keys were mine. The lesson was his, and that was enough.